All right, there's 11 things in this statement. It's a very long statement. I'll try to get through all of them. First of all, you expressed that you appreciated my attitude. I want to express that my attitude that I expressed is what I was taught being raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is from attending church and mingling with other members. The vast majority of members that I associate with exude love and tolerance towards everyone. Are there exceptions? Of course. But if I were to reflect my 40 years as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I would say that they are the most tolerant, loving, and kind people that I've ever met. And I just want to point out there are lots of loving, kind people in other religions. And I totally recognize that my experience might be biased. Okay, next thing you brought up here was the Catholic Church. Is the Catholic Church the great and abominable church? So it describes the great and abominable church. It says that it persecuted the saints of God, tortured them, bound them down with a yoke of iron. If I try to look through history and try to find a church that was, burning people alive and killing them and things like this for their religious beliefs, one place I could look is historical things that the Catholic Church has done, like 1,000 years ago, at the time when the Protestants were, trying to live their religion. The Catholic Church did a lot of bad stuff to them. To be clear, I don't believe the Catholic Church is the great and abominable church anymore. Historically, the leaders at that time, whatever was going on, may have been, but not anymore. Every Catholic that I've ever met is an amazing person. They'd be totally opposed to anything like this. I think contextual history is a pretty important thing, and classifying current members of the Catholic Church as members of the great and abominable church just does not fit at all to me. And it doesn't fit with the description in the Book of Mormon either. Used to, not anymore. I do not sit in church and have leaders or people like that bashing on the Catholic Church. I think I remember one conference talk where they mentioned it, but there wasn't hatred or anything. It was more of like a historical lesson. And then one time when I think I was around 12, we had a substitute teacher in my Sunday school class that went off the book and shared a lesson about some history in the Catholic Church. There was no hatred towards Catholics or anything like that or any other group. It's just not something that we do in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We don't sit around talking negatively about other churches at all. We talk about Jesus Christ. But I can't tell you the number of times that I have had friends come to me and say, oh, we had a lesson in my church about Mormons. And then they'll start spewing all this horrible nonsense, bigotry. Oh yeah, they worship Satan and they're cultists and all this kind of stuff. That's never something that I've ever seen happen in my 40 years as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Could you find it somewhere? I'm sure you could. There are millions of members, and you're going to get some bad apples in there. Even among leaders, you're going to get some bad apples. There's going to be, hundreds of thousands of talks recorded. One of them is going to be stupid. A few will probably be. But just as a general consensus, that is not accurate and representative of the church at all. Okay, you were kind of surprised by what I said about, the church leaders saying that people in other churches are good and inspired and serve God. I've heard that lots of times from lots of leaders. I'll pull up a couple quotes for you. Gordon M. Hinckley, we appreciate the virtues and values of other religions. We say to people, bring all the good that you have and let us see if we can add to it. We say in a spirit of love, bring all the good you have and let us add to it. That is the message of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We recognize the good in all churches. We recognize the truth in all churches. Jeffrey R. Holland, an apostle, we have much to learn from other religions, and we should respect them as we hope they respect us. We recognize and honor sincere faith wherever it is found. Elder Uchtdorf, another apostle, we honor and respect sincere souls from all religions, no matter where or when they lived, who have loved God and sought to do his will. God loves all his children. He listens to the prayers of the humble and sincere of every nation, tongue, and people. He grants light to those who seek, light meaning inspiration from God, to those who seek and honor him and are willing to obey his commandments. And what I get from that is that anybody can be inspired, anybody can be directed by God. God loves all of them. We respect them. We honor them. We see the good in them. This is the message that I get from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This is what I get from going to church. This is what I get from the leaders. I can go, there's just tons and tons of quotes here. I can go on and on and on and on and on. Could you find something to the contrary? I'm sure you could cherry pick something and find a few, bad things they said here or there. They're not perfect. And that actually leads us to the next thing that you brought up. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe that there are humans that are called to a position. The humans are fallible. They are not perfect. They are not omniscient. They are not constantly a conduit of God. They are humans called to a stewardship. They have a responsibility to seek God, to strive to receive revelation, be inspired by God. But many times, most of the time, they're just men or women. We have women that speak in general conference as well. And they're not perfect. And they're going to goof up. And they're going to say things that are wrong. Out of millions of members and thousands or hundreds of thousands of leaders and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of talks being given all over the world, you could cherry pick and try to misrepresent the church and say, this is what the church stands for, but it's just not accurate. Now, what about this thing about the prophets can't lead people astray? Yes, that's something that I heard one of the previous church leaders say. The prophet can never lead somebody astray, and then it was repeated here recently by President Nelson. I heard it repeated. I have a problem with this because to me that's misleading. Define being led astray. What does that mean? Does that mean that the prophet's never going to make a mistake? Because that totally contradicts everything else that I've heard the prophets say about, I even was reading something where the church leaders were saying they were worried that people would rely too heavily on them. And they said, if you ever put your trust in man, you'll be let down. The prophets repeatedly saying that they're fallible, that they're not perfect, that they're going to make mistakes, that they have made mistakes, that they are making mistakes. So if you're interpreting the word astray to mean, infallibility or something like this, that just doesn't fit. It's not consistent. So what are some other things that astray could mean? How about being led to outer darkness and not going to heaven? I could get on board with that. I don't believe that if you're striving to follow the prophet, that you're going to go to outer darkness. That's like Mormon hell. It's total separation from God. Not going to happen. So if the prophet was ever going to lead everybody into outer darkness, God would remove him from his position. Okay, I could get on board with that. Okay, next thing here, you said, why did the era of racism persist? Something important to recognize is that Joseph Smith was the original president of the church. He received a lot of revelations. He wasn't actually the president for very long. He was murdered around a similar time as most of the members of the church were having their houses burned down and being threatened under penalty of death that they had to leave the state of Missouri or they'd be shot on sight. Don't believe me? Look it up. So that might in some way fit the whole abominable church, great and abominable church, which might be why, they're being portrayed in the temple ceremony in this way. Do I see people doing that today? Not so much. So maybe it did fit at that time, doesn't fit anymore. Maybe this is why the Great and Abominable Church wasn't listed out directly. Maybe it's more about actions than a name or a certain group. I don't know. I think most people in other religions are generally good people and would not want to shoot anybody or anything like this. The question is why did racism persist? Well, Joseph Smith actually ordained black people to the priesthood. And then a short while later, he was murdered, and he was replaced by Brigham Young as the president of the church. Brigham Young has a stewardship to receive revelation from God. But Brigham Young is also a human, and he has his own biases, his own beliefs, his own prejudices. And his belief was apparently that black people were cursed because they were descendants of Ham, and therefore they were not to receive the priesthood. And so he didn't allow black people to be ordained to the priesthood or go through the temple. Now, Brigham Young was the president of the church for 40 years. And so a lot of the traditions and things that we've inherited in the church are not Joseph Smith traditions. These are Brigham Young traditions. And so some people in religion are often very dogmatic, including members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're very traditional, and that was a tradition that they inherited for a president of the church who was president for 40 years. And it passed down for a long time until finally somebody actually sought God in revelation, received revelation. Nope, you're supposed to give the priesthood to black and white people and not exclude the black people. And then that was fixed. That's embarrassing in my opinion. I think that the leaders would be held accountable before God for that. Now, can I say that I can do better and that I wouldn't have fallen for the same traditional thing? No judgment there. I think the intentions are good, but it was a terrible mistake. Why is this blamed on culture? Because it wasn't revelation. There's no revelation ever saying that black people weren't supposed to receive the priesthood. And so the only thing I can attribute to is tradition. And what about the racism found in the Book of Mormon? It's very psychologically consistent that when you're at war with another person, that you become racist towards them. This has happened in a lot of wars in America. The Nephites were at war with the Lamanites, and they very likely psychologically had a lot of racism towards the Lamanites, and it is portrayed in their writing. They make horribly racist statements. I do not approve that, but I can understand that to be psychologically consistent as that normally happens during wartime. The last thing you talked about here that I really don't have time to address was LGBTQ as a lifestyle. Why did I use that wording? That probably was not the best wording. I could have used better wording. Sorry for the confusion on that. Maybe I'll make another video and kind of address what I was meaning to say. Oh, one more thing. You said that hatred was a core doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I don't know where in the heck you got that information from, but please do some more research. ChatGPT, is hatred a core doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? No, hatred is not. It's the greatest commandment. There's all these things here. That is ridiculous.